Okay, let's talk about the ladies' obligation for Purim. They also have an obligation to hear the Megillah twice. That's a little bit of a novelty because under normal circumstances, women are exempt from time-bound positive mitzvahs. However, why are they not exempt from the mitzvah of listening to the Megillah? Because the whole of the story of the Megillah came about through Esther. Esther was, of course, a lady, or I mean that's the assumption because it's a female name, and it's because
does it have to be a female name?
these are all obviously very Kabbalistic questions. I can't answer them for you because you're not. That's right. You're too puny. I can't reveal all these Kabbalistic secrets. However, yes, nevertheless, Esther was a lady, and because the whole miracle of the story of Purim came through the lady, therefore the women also take upon themselves the mitzvah of hearing the Megillah, the mitzvahs of Purim, of listening to the Megillah in the nighttime and the day. If possible, women should go to shul to listen to the Megillah together with a minyan. Right? However, that's not always possible because obviously, sometimes houses are not designed for women to easily get out and go to shul. So, for example, they may be full of little children that need to be taken care of, or they may just have been locked in. That means that what you'll find in most Orthodox communities is that you normally have Megillah readings for women as well. And that means that at some point in the evening and some point in the morning, somebody will lay the Megillah for the ladies, and they'll all gather together. Somebody will make a bracha over the recital of the reading of the Megillah, and then they'll all listen together. And at some point during the day as well, you've got some people who are expert Megillah readers, and they'll go around. That's what they'll spend a lot of their Purim doing, going around reading Megillahs to all different kinds of people, different kinds of groups. But in all events, the women should listen to the reading of the Megillah as well. There's even an inyan that children who are old enough to be able to sit quietly should be able to come to the Megillah reading as well. That I would imagine probably counts out most of you. But if there are children who can sit quietly, then they should be brought along. What's the inyan over here? The inyan is very simple. When it comes to listening to the Megillah, you've got to hear every single word. So if you've got children who are making a lot of noise, then it's going to be a problem because you're not going to be able to fulfill your obligation to hear every word. And that's why you'll see, when you get to shul, you'll see that with the reading of the Megillah, when it gets to the name of Haman, lots of noise is made, banging and hooting and all kinds of things. And that's okay, that's fine. But a Baal Korah who knows his stuff, a person who reads the Megillah who knows his stuff, so when he said the word Haman and everyone starts making the noise, when he comes to start up again, he'll backtrack a word in order to make sure that everybody heard all of the words that need to be said. So the simplest thing to do is to, if you can, is to follow along with the reading of the Megillah, either to follow along if you've got a kosher Megillah, which is a Megillah that's written on a piece of parchment with a special quill and ink. If you've got one of those, then that's fantastic. If not, at least to follow along using a chumash in order not to miss any of the words.
So when he backtracks, does he say Haman again?
Yes, he does. I was wondering whether I need to point out that when he's repeating the word Haman, you do not need to make noise all over again.
Because that could cause quite a problem.
It could definitely cause a backup of some kind. I did actually think to myself that surely that's not necessarily to say, but you know what? Now I've learned over the years that things that don't need to be said are normally the things that should be said over and over again. So yes, when the person reading the Megillah comes to repeat the words and repeats the name Haman, so don't start making noise again, right? Once is enough. In the shul that I daven in, my favorite part of Purim is watching the face of the person laning when all the noise is being done, because he gets very upset, and that's all part and parcel of the fun. I think that's the only reason why people make the noise, actually, is you see these people getting upset because, I think it's great. I really do. And I think the more innovative the kids are with making noise, the funnier it is.
Who gets upset?
The person reading the Megillah.
If they do this regularly, you'd think they would get used to it after a while.
Apparently not. I think it's a personality thing, actually. But there was one epic year where somebody brought into shul a foghorn. Now, you know, foghorns, they beat everything hands down. It doesn't matter what noise you're able to make. A foghorn takes care of everything. And this fellow was remarkably sly. And I'm not going to mention who it was, because if I did, my son would get very upset. But he was remarkably sly, and he would wait until all the noise started dying down before he started letting go on this foghorn. And so everyone thought, oh, good, you know, we're about to stop the noise. We can start landing again. All of a sudden, this enormous foghorn would fill up the shul, and of course, it warmed the hearts of many of the people there. And it was quite a jolly time was had by all. The good thing about it was it's relatively small, so he could keep it. Nobody actually knew where it was coming from, so everyone was sort of blaming everybody else. It's like, you know, it was him. So that's why I suggest take to shul things that'll make noise. You know, like I said, the more innovative you are, the more points you get, the more reward you'll get in the world to come for utilizing your warped and deranged minds to come up with something that will make noise. Good. Okay. There is an obligation to hear the Megillah with a minyan. Right? A minyan, of course, is 10 males over the age of 13. 10. It's got to be 10 individual people. It can't be someone with 10 personalities. That doesn't count. Which is unfortunate, because many of you would be your own walking minyan. But what can you do? And what happens during the recitation of the Megillah, whilst the Megillah is being read, there are going to be 4 verses that are going to be where the person reading the Megillah is going to stop before he reads them. The whole community will read them out loud, and then the person who's reading the Megillah will then recite them. He'll sing them along afterwards. The first one is in the 2nd chapter, in verse number 5. It says, Ish Yehudi aya b'Shushan Abira, and it's talking about, it's now introducing for the first time Mordechai, that there was a Yehudi, there was a Jew who lived in Shushan Abira. Interestingly enough, this is the first time that we're called Yehudim. The first time that the word Yehudi is used in Tanakh is here in the story of Esther. And it says, Ish Yehudi aya b'Shushan Abira, u'shmoi Mordechai ben Yair ben Shimi ben Kish, Ish Yemini. So the pasuk says that there was a Jew who lived in Shushan, the capital city Shushan. His name was Mordechai, the son of Yair, the son of Shimi, the son of Kish. Ish Yemini, he was a very important man. Again, it's interesting, the Gemara learns out all kinds of things over here, that this is not a direct chronology, it's skipping out generations on the way, just to give us an idea of what kind of pedigree this person has. When I was a kid growing up, the explanation that was given was to teach us. It says that his name was Mordechai, the son of Yair, the son of Shimi, the son of Kish, and that was just to teach us that real men eat quiche as well. But that was just, I don't think it's true. Anyway, in chapter number 8, verse number 15 and verse number 16 are going to be recited by everybody first, and it reads out like this. It says, Mordechai Yotzam Lifnei HaMelech. This is the turning point of the story of the Megillah. Up until now, things have looked pretty dire. Now, Mordechai is finally, things are beginning to turn around. So it says, Mordechai Yotzam Lifnei HaMelech Belevush Malchus Tcheles Chor Vateres Zav Gdoila V'Tachis Putz V'Agomon, that he came out from the king wearing all kinds of royal, regal clothing. Va'ir Tzolo Smecha, and the city was very joyous. La'udim Ha'ita Or V'Simcha V'Sason V'Yikar, and the Jews had aura, they had light, they had joy, they had happiness, and they had wealth. The Gemara learns all different kinds of things over here about what these different words mean, but it means finally that the Jews were able to get back onto track. It means that things are finally going to work out the way they're supposed to. And the last verse that's read out loud is the very last verse in the whole of the Megillah, where it says, Ki Mordechai Yehudi Mishnah leMelech Achashverosh, that Mordechai was the second-hand man, the right-hand man to Achashverosh. V'gadol leYehudi v'ratzui l'rav ochiv doresh tov la'amoy v'doy v'shalom l'chol zaroi, and everything was good, and we in a state of peace, and Baruch Hashem, everything, the story of Purim comes to an end. Why do we recite those verses? It's very rare that we stop the person who's reciting, who's laning, who's reading from the Torah or from a Megillah or from the Haftarah to say the verses out loud. It's very rare that we do that. Why do we do it over here? So first of all, the first reason is because these verses indicate very important moments inside the story of Purim. So even when like I mentioned yesterday, the story of Purim, the Megillah, is something which was written and had to go through the censorship, which means it's been written in a certain story-like kind of way, just to make it easy. And but there is a story within the story, and we need to know when things are really beginning and what's happening and when things are going to change for the better. And that's one reason why the idea of reciting the verses out loud. However, there is another reason as well, which is interesting, that is that we have to be aware of what's going on, which means if we know that verses are going to be recited out loud, that means we're going to follow along in order to be able to recite them together with everybody else. Like I mentioned before, you have to follow each word, you have to hear what's going on, and if that's the case, so it's like a technique that allows us to follow along, because we know at some point everybody's going to start reciting those verses. Yeah.
If this was censorship by the Ahasuerus government, why would we have, let's say there was no censorship, why would we have written it? What would the Megillah be?
It's a good question. The Gemara says like this. I mentioned yesterday, the Gemara asked an interesting question about Ahasuerus. The Gemara says whether Ahasuerus was a Melech Tipesh, whether he was a foolish king, or whether he was a Melech Chacham, whether he was a very wise king. Right, and the truth of the matter is that the Gemara is leaning towards the idea that he was very wise, he was very politically adept, and everything he did in order to make sure that he wasn't going to end up having to take responsibility for what happened if it went wrong, as it did. Right, the original plan of Haman did not work out the way that it was supposed to. It says the Gemara like this: at one point during the Megillah, when Haman has been invited for the second time to have a tea party, which is obviously an indication that in Persia at the time they were obviously very cultured and very sophisticated, because Esther invited Ahasuerus for a tea party, which is a very English thing to do. What happened was, it says that finally she reveals that somebody is trying to destroy her nation and her people, and Ahasuerus, pitching for an Oscar in that year's nominations, sort of stands up and says, "Me who zeveza, who could that possibly be? Who's trying to wipe you out? What are you suggesting, my dear?" And it says in the Gemara, it's this wonderful moment where where Esther points at Ahasuerus. And the Gemara says that an angel came and pushed her finger along to Haman, right? So that, because really Ahasuerus was just as wicked and just as evil and just as much of an anti-Semite as Haman was, he was just in a different way. It's interesting the way that the Gemara describes the difference between the two is that Haman could not live with the Jews. He had to destroy the Jews. He was going to do that come what may. Ahasuerus was able, he hated the Jews with a passion, but he was able to live with them so long as they were going to be of benefit to him. Right, which means that he's I guess he's a fair weather anti-Semite. Pardon?
As long as they were doing his taxes.
As long as they were doing his taxes, right? Both paying them and doing them, I guess, because they're the people of the book, so they're all accountants. But the idea being that hidden within the story of the Megillah, we see something else unfolding, which means, again, like I mentioned yesterday, Ahasuerus, when you read the story just with a superficial reading, comes out of the story looking a little naive. You imagine, what did he do? He gave over his ring to Haman in order, not that, so he could claim afterwards that he didn't know what Haman was doing. He also gives over his ring at the end to Mordechai. He's like, I'm a trusting kind of a guy. I can't be held accountable for what all these people are doing. The truth was very, very far from that. However, for example, it says at one point that Haman comes in front of Ahasuerus and he says that there's a nation and there's spread out all over the place, and we should destroy them, and we should uproot them, and we should kill them. And Achashverosh says, "Oh, okay." And there's just one small piece of information that's missing from the description that Haman gives of this obviously vile nation that has to be destroyed, and that is which one? He doesn't say what the name of this nation is. And the Mefarshim, the commentaries explain that Haman was also very smart, and he understood that there was a certain sense, Achashverosh was building up over here a certain sense of accountability. This has got nothing to do with me. I didn't do it.
Plausible deniability.
Huh?
Like plausible deniability.
Plausible deniability, right? So when they come and they say, hey, how could you have agreed to allow the Jews to be destroyed? So Achashverosh could turn around and say, the Jews? Oh my gosh, goodness me.
Yeah.
I thought you were talking about the Tutis, or I thought you were talking about
Try and
the
deny it.
huh?
Was Achashverosh,
If it went wrong.
was Achashverosh a Jewish one? Yeah.
Achashverosh wasn't Jewish.
Okay, fine. Don't worry.
I won't.
Good.
If Achashverosh were Jewish and behaved like that, then I would really worry.
Yeah.
But he wasn't. He was not Jewish, and it's a denial of accountability, right? It wasn't me. I had no idea.
What made the Rabbi Shalom give him a schuz that from him? Actually, it's from him, David HaMelech. I mean, he is part of it, no matter how you want to.
I don't know. It's an interesting question. It says like this, that Esther and Achashverosh, after the story of Purim, actually had a child together. That was somebody called Daryavish. Daryavish, is Jewish because Esther was Jewish. And that means that Daryavish was the one who allowed the Jews to go back to Israel and to start rebuilding the temple. He's Daryavish, just in case everybody here is familiar with their history, he's Darius II, not the first. Right? So just to confuse things a little bit. But why was, I don't know, where did Achashverosh have the merit to be able to have a part of all of this? I'm not sure, really. I don't know. But you know the rule over here, right? You shouldn't ask questions I don't know the answers to. That's to be on the safe side. You really shouldn't ask questions. That's you never know, right?
By picking after Alex.
Why was Achashverosh not punished as much as Haman was?
Why was Achashverosh not punished as much
Surely
as Haman
he should
was?
be punished more because he was a bystander. He knew what Haman was doing. He should have stopped.
Yeah, I think again it's interesting. I think the reason over here is because Haman was. I guess the way to describe it is Haman is an active anti-Semite, and Achashverosh is a passive anti-Semite.
It's worse to be a passive anti-Semite than an
I think the truth of the matter, as far as we're concerned, right? I think it's, however paradoxical this sounds, I think it's better to be exposed to active anti-Semites than passive ones. At least you know who your enemy is, which is the Jews knew perfectly well that Haman was their enemy, and they had to be very careful, and they had to act accordingly. Achashverosh, it wasn't sure whether he was or whether he wasn't, which means that when it was beneficial for him, he was okay with the Jews. Right? And when it wasn't beneficial, when he wasn't interested anymore, which interestingly enough has been a little bit of a prototype for the non-Jewish leadership of the Jewish communities over history, actually, going back to all over the place. Go back into Spain. In Spain, the communities relied very much on the patronage of the local duke or the local bishop. And on days when he was happy to be the patron of the Jews, so it was good for the Jews. On days when it wasn't, they had no idea what was going to happen. They had no idea what each day was going to bring. Later on in Eastern Europe, with the idea of the Poritz, who was the landowner, the duke of the area, it was exactly the same thing. They really had no idea from one day to the next. By most of them, they had no idea from one day to the next what was going to be. Today was a good day. Tomorrow may not be a good day, right? Today was a bad day. Who knows? Maybe tomorrow will be a good day. What is interesting is that in Jewish history, you'll see that inside of all of these communities, the non-Jewish, very, very powerful dukes and bishops and landowners normally had what was called a court Jew. And the court Jew, at least one. And the court Jew, of course, was the one who was giving him advice and the one who was organizing his finances. And that's probably one of the reasons why they were so, they had this very, very difficult to define relationship with the Jews, was because on the one hand they really they couldn't manage without them, and on the other hand I think it bothered them terribly that they couldn't manage without them, and it was like a constant reminder that they were needed, and whatever. I mean, it really bred a lot of uncertainty. There were in history there were certain places where the patrons of the Jews were actually very, very good for the Jews, and they cared very much about the Jews that were living on their lands around. There weren't very many of them, it must be said, but every now and then there were. Some of them even went as far as trying to save the Jews that lived on their lands during the Holocaust, trying to get them to save them before the Nazis got a hold of them. Whatever. How we got into that? I can't remember, but.
Passive anti-Semitism.
Oh, passive anti-Semitism, active anti-Semitism. Sorry?
Achashverosh's treatment of the Jews is a model of how Jews were treated by landowners. That's what he got on it.
Oh, okay. Thank you. I mean, it's pretty tenuous, but whatever, it'll do, right?
I'm very unclear about that point.
Which point?
That passive anti-Semitism is better than active anti-Semitism. I
Yeah.
mean, I know it's nice to see the devil when he's there, but I mean,
Agreed.
so you're saying it's better that someone...
I think
Because
Someone
passive
who actually does
anti-Semites
it.
eventually become active.
Yeah.
You just never know when it's going to happen.
Yeah, I think that's really perhaps passive and active was the wrong. Maybe passive was the wrong word to use, but when you've got
Dormant.
a dormant, you know what? When you've got a dormant anti-Semite, you've got sleeper cells, right? Here in Europe right now, they're very concerned about fundamentalist Muslim sleeper cells, and they've got no idea when these things are going to be triggered off, which means they know they're there. They can't identify them, and they don't know what's going to be the trigger that's going to turn it into something potentially very, very, very dangerous. So Achashverosh, in a certain way, Achashverosh is like a dormant, he's this dormant anti-Semite, which could be woken up at any point, any moment, something could set it off, right? And that, in a certain way, again, the whole time that he's dormant, so of course it's better to be with somebody like that than somebody who's actively against you, right?
You're saying then you're putting on par in a way. Let's put this in part. Like, the active anti-Semite is Hitler. The passive anti-Semites are all of SS officers.
No,
No.
the SS were pretty active.
No, I
Yes,
wouldn't
that's
say that
pretty
at all. I would say the difference perhaps between, the Nazi party headed by Hitler, which was very much an active anti-Semitic movement, as opposed to some of the governments that were passive, and passive to the point where their anti-Semitism showed through by they're not doing anything, which means it's there. It is there, right? We've got to be something to be concerned about. I don't know. Again,
Is it still anti-Semitic if they wouldn't have done it for any group of people? Just because they're not standing up for the Jews?
good question. you know what? Then of course it's just morally reprehensible, which means that you're right. You're right.
Ahasuerus, it seems like he was just worried about power and like whatever. It could have been a different nation.
Well, I mean, the Gemara said, yeah, okay. So Ahasuerus has got this certain hang up about he's very uncomfortable about what his standing is inside of the various nations that he's conquered. But the one would imagine that if Haman would have come and said, hey, there's a nation out there, if he wasn't talking about the Jewish nation, right? There's a nation out there, we really need to wipe them out. You would have imagined that Haman would say, that Ahasuerus would have said, really, which one are we talking about? Over here, it was so clear that you're talking about the Jews that there wasn't anything to ask about. It was just fine, okay, take care of them. Which means that Ahasuerus is definitely, according to the Gemara, Ahasuerus is definitely an anti-Semite. If you're talking about, if you're talking about countries during the Second World War, for example, that just closed their borders, for example, like Switzerland, and didn't let anybody in, come what may. So, is that okay if it wasn't directed just against the Jews? So is it anti-Semitic? No, it's probably anti everything. It's just good old-fashioned xenophobia, I imagine. However, they didn't have any trouble. Taking Nazi gold.
What do you mean?
Swiss government invented the Jewish time.
Sorry?
The Swiss ministers, came up with the idea that all the Germans should stamp a J into every Jew's passport. So if they come to the border, they say, "Oh, you're Jew," so forget it. That was the Swiss idea.
Okay, good.
So in terms of, for sure, they were anti-Semites, big ones.
Oh, I think so too, but I think they were also anti everything
They
actually.
led whole Polish platoons that fled, that deserted.
Yeah?
They accepted them. They had to do whatever, so they would build roads, but
Polish.
Yeah. Whatever. Okay, I don't know. Was anti-Semitism was rife? Were they anti other things as well? Yeah. Just all comes in one big package deal, right? It's a joint package. Be anti everything.
It's easier that way.
For sure. And then you don't have to start working out who you like and who you don't like. It's ridiculous, right? That's just be consistent. It's considered to be a great honor to read the Megillah, right, for everybody in the community. A person who wasn't specifically asked to do so shouldn't assume that he's going to, unless he's a resident chazan of the shul. If you've got somebody who every week his job in the shul is to read from the Torah, so then it's going to be his job to read from the Megillah as well. But under normal circumstances, unless you've been asked specifically to do the job, then you should wait. And if you haven't been asked, you should wait until you are before you assume that you're going to. The Megillah has its own tune. Right? Now, it's interesting. Most things that we learn, most things that are read, have got their own tune. So reading from the Torah has got one tune. Reading from the prophets has got another tune. Reading from the Megillah has got its own tune as well. No, it's not the same tune as Eicha, because the tune of Eicha is a very mournful tune.
Correct.
It's a tune which reflects the concept of destruction. The tune of the Megillah is a little bit more upbeat.
Give us an example.
However, what's interesting is you should know that I think the tune of Eicha is absolutely beautiful. Actually, it's very haunting. But there are a few verses inside of the Megillah in Esther. There are a few verses that are read with the tune of Eicha. That the verses that talk about the destruction of the temple, the verses that talk about going into exile, and they over there, the person laning the Megillah, he will use the tune of Eicha, which is the Lamentations, which is this mournful tune. So there's a classic yeshiva joke which you may or may not appreciate. I'm going to tell it to you anyway, so you may as well laugh at the end of it. But not before. 1 minute. I'll let you know.
First line of laugh.
That they ask why it is that why do you have some of the tune of Lamentations inside of the Megillah of Eicha? So they say in order that the Litvaks are the Jews from the area of Lithuania who are considered to be very cold and very non-emotional, in order that the Litvaks can enjoy the Megillah as well. Right? I haven't finished. 1 minute. So then they say, well, hold on a second. So why don't they read the whole thing in the tune of Eicha, right? If that's what's going to bring them joy, then let them read the whole thing in the tune of Eicha. They said, no, we're not to exaggerate over here. There's a limit to how happy a person can be. So now you can laugh. That's it. Thank you. Again,
The first part of the joke was better than the end.
Yeah,
No, you've got to have
I didn't get the last part.
you've got to have
You should
a
amputate the second half of the joke and just leave it at the first half.
Yeah.
It's a better joke that way.
We call it constructive criticism here.
Thank you for the joke, Rabbi. All of it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Rabbi.
Bernie, you can come again.
Happens we haven't going to tell it. Very good.
Anyway, what's more important? Somebody. It's interesting when my father was sitting shiva for my grandfather. It was over Purim, and somebody came to lane the Megillah on Purim night. There was a whole debate about what was more important, whether it was more important to have somebody who knew the tune. The tune is called a trop. Somebody who knew the trop well, but wasn't so wasn't so familiar with the voweling of the words, or whether it was better to have somebody who could read the words very clearly but wasn't familiar with the tune.
Read the words very clearly, no?
Right. So the final answer was that it makes more sense. Somebody's got to read the words clearly, and if he doesn't know the tune, he doesn't know the tune. That's more important. Yeah.